It's 2:01. Gotta go. All right. We stay true to our word here in the 20-minute sprint. Let's start the clock. There you go. 20 minutes. You're in, you're out, you're on with your selling. If you haven't been here before, welcome. If you're coming back, you know the rules of engagement. Just a quick little overview here. 20-minute sprint training. We are going to go deep into one subject matter, one topic area in exactly 20 minutes. I will hit the clock when we are at the 20-minute buzzer, so you can jump out. We are going to hang around for 10 more minutes afterwards and have a little quick discussion. If you have any Q&A, pop it into the chat. First come, first serve basis. Today, I have the honor of being joined here on the virtual stage with Morgan Buchanan, the lovely and talented BDR who first came to me and opened my eyes to the wonderful world of just-in-time learning at Speckit. We've now been friends, connections, associates, call it what you will, for the last couple of years. I have had a front row seat to Morgan's transition from BDR to SDR, now to account executive. I made that same transition, but I made it in 2005. So I thought bringing Morgan to the front stage here would be a bit more time relevant and help us to get to the bottom of exactly all the fun stuff that you need to do to execute at the highest level. Welcome, Morgan Buchanan, to the 20-minute sprint training.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. And yeah, I mean, you said it best. We've kept in touch. And I think that goes to show that if you BDR well, the connections that you make as a BDR will continue to flourish, even when you're in AE and beyond. So yeah, really excited to dive in.
So 20 minutes, we don't have all the time in the world. We had a great conversation last week. In prep for this, I was able to boil down 5 of the core essentials. We went through about 15 of them. But to harness the most out of your brain here in a 20-minute sprint, I refined it down to what I see as the top 5. I'm going to tee them up, let you take it from there, and I'll jump in when there might be some good commentary. So one thing that you started with, or I think it's a good place to begin, which I thought was really interesting, was state your intentions early. I don't think enough people do that. Tell us a little bit more about that as far as your journey and stating your intent.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I want to caveat this by saying I had the benefit of having my first BDR or my first SDR manager was very easy to talk to and very, very invested in my growth as an individual, both personally and professionally. But I think that even if maybe you don't feel as comfortable talking about your long-term goals with your boss or, whoever your direct supervisor is, it's a great way to gain their respect early on by saying, hey, I've been thinking about this. This is what I know, what I want, and I want to discuss what I need to do to get there. And hey, by the way, how can you help me get there? How can I exceed expectations? How can I be the best member on your team to really propel myself to the next level? And I think that can show that you're very motivated, that you want to do well, and that you're invested in your time at the company. And so really, my first week as an inbound SDR, it was my first tech job. It was my first true sales job. I had no idea what I was talking about. I had never even looked at Salesforce before, and I was about to have to go and, work for a company whose platform is heavily integrated with Salesforce. And so I sat down with my boss and we started talking about long-term goals. And I said, I know that I'm really new at this, but I think that my long-term goal is to be an enterprise AE. And his response was, okay, that's great. We're going to start working on how we can get you there. And so I think by setting that intention early and continuing to check in with some of the benchmarks that we discussed, things that I needed to get better at in order to be considered for that account executive role, that kept it top of mind. So that for him, when he had a spot, he actually ended up being the manager of the SMB AE team at the time. And so when he had an open spot, I was the first person that he thought of because we had been talking for a year about me coming on to the AE team and that was my goal and that I was invested in that and that I wanted to do well.
And I think that's the key takeaway here for me looking at this from a leadership perspective. It lets you know who to keep top of mind when those next opportunities come up and who the next class and the next cohort is that's really priming themselves to be in that position. It just sets the tone early. You don't want to surprise anybody and just invite that conversation in the moment. You want to build up to it over time. I think this is a real key one. I think a lot of people miss it too. It's a great way to start. Seek mentorship. And you dropped something on me when we were talking about this, which I thought was a little interesting. I won't give it away, but tell us a little bit more about the mentorship that you sought out during your transition and your journey so far.
Yeah. And you know what? I actually thought about you because I was talking with so let me give you some background. What I said to Matt in our first discussion was I actually sought mentorship outside of my organization, outside of Speckit. I wanted to get someone's opinion on what it was that I was doing who had never even seen Speckit before, to give me an unbiased opinion on what I could do better, or where, what was going to happen with my career. How could I improve in other ways that maybe weren't Speckit related? And so it's interesting. I was discussing with my current boss, our SVP of sales, Christina Brady. She's a great follow on LinkedIn if you don't follow her. But she was actually talking about the importance of seeking mentorship outside of your organization. And so I think that when your mentors are exclusively from your organization, it can be very easy to get hyper focused on tiny details and maybe miss the bigger picture. And so when you seek mentorship outside of your organization, you're able to get that bird's eye view, that bigger picture into yourself, your abilities, your career, that I think really provide a helpful perspective when you're thinking about a big jump from BDR to AE. Because BDR to AE, you're not going to be at your current company your whole career. And so it's important to have perspective that's going to benefit you for your entire career, not just your time at your organization.
I loved this one, and it really opened my eyes to sometimes we can get inside an echo chamber inside one organization where when our mentors are internal,
Yeah.
they can somewhat be a broken record on certain things, and they're just repeating a lot of the terminology and best practices and processes. They don't want to step on any of the leadership's toes, so they're just somewhat towing the line and making sure that they're reinforcing what's there, which is positive to some degree, but you need a challenge, you need a counterweight to that. I thought that insight of getting outside the four walls of a business was really, really, really strong. It's great to see that. And sometimes those professional relationships outside through a network, they get into personal relationships. Who knows? Maybe we'll have some time to get into that later.
Yeah.
Private joke here between Morgan and me. We'll talk about it later. Trust the process. Maybe an obvious one, but sometimes the obvious stuff gets wildly overlooked because our eyes get blind to it. Talk to us a little bit more about what you meant by this.
Yeah, so I think it's very important to be consistent. And so, of course, hitting quota is going to be table stakes for you in your role as a BDR. And that's just it. There's no excuses. That's just what you have to do. I also think that it's important to be consistent with your inputs. And so when you're thinking about, your activity metrics as a BDR, you're still going to be a BDR when you're an AE. There's a good chance that your first AE role is going to be full cycle. And so, once a BDR, always a BDR, this is your time to really hone those skills to set yourself up for success when you do step into that AE role. So you want to have mastery of being a BDR, mastery over your activities, really understand what you can actually put out as far as your inputs. That doesn't really make sense as a sentence, but understand what you can do consistently so that your leadership can see this person is consistent. I know that I can count on them, because that trust in you as a BDR will then transition to them trusting you as an AE when you start to work those deals full cycle.
When I look at this from a leadership perspective, and we're talking about trusting the process, when making those decisions to move somebody into that next AE slot, what we're really talking about is plugging them into a system which they then have to go learn and apply as quickly as possible. And yes, results are key there. We want to make sure that that person has already delivered, but how they delivered matters. And if they delivered by trusting the process that was there as a BDR and SDR, I have tons of confidence now that I can plug that person in and they're going to learn and apply that new process, which is just the continued conversation that they'd already started. So it's really showing that coachability aspect on the center stage that's critical here. Again, this gets overlooked a lot, but it speaks volumes about the character of the person that I'm looking to put into a role, when I can see them learning and applying the process that's already there.
Yep.
This is a great one. Act on feedback. And this is really important. And I was careful about the wording here, practicing my own active listening when we had spoken. It wasn't just seek feedback. It wasn't just get feedback. You were pretty specific and deliberate about saying act on feedback. Why is that?
Well, I think that, people talk about feedback a lot. And I think it's become a little bit of a buzzword. You see it a lot on LinkedIn. You might hear your own leadership talk about it. You might have a company culture where, feedback is considered to be a gift, and you receive feedback from peers. You receive feedback from your managers. You receive feedback from folks outside of your team. And that's all fine and good. And the point is that you actually have to act on that and execute and show that you're consistently doing it. It's not enough to just say, I'm open to feedback, I want to get better. You actually have to then apply that and let it sink in and actually continue to execute on that feedback rather than just saying, yeah, I'm going to take it and listen to it. And I think, Matt, this goes back to what you said on the previous slide about coachability. When I was interviewing, and yes, I did have to interview for the AE role, even though I was already an employee, but I played up, and I did this when I interviewed for the BDR role as well. I played up the coachability aspect of my own personality. And that stems from my own background as a professional dancer, where coaching was it was something that you got coached every single day of your entire career. After shows, you sat down and you got feedback at 11 o'clock at night. Like, that's just how it was. And then you immediately had to go and fix that in your whatever dance you were doing. And it's the same idea within sales. Like, maybe it's a cold call and you ask your manager for feedback. Well, on the next cold call, you need to at least show that, you're trying. You heard, you listened, you're trying to apply that feedback, and it won't be perfect. And I think that any leader who's worth their salt knows that their salespeople are not going to be perfect. However, it's important to show that you're trying to actually implement that feedback and apply it to your daily life.
And when you're interviewing, I'm going to assume that the manager you have now as an account executive is different than the manager you had as a BDR, right?
Yep, correct.
So what we're talking about is not only a new position, but a brand new relationship with a new team, a new job, a new set of tasks, and a new leader that you're working with. And in great organizations like Speckit, it's a lot of sharing. It's a lot of personal help. Obviously, there's a lot of leveling of those relationships, but acting on feedback is critical because, going back to that coachability piece that Morgan's talking about, again, as a leader, when I'm looking at that, I want to see somebody who is able to learn and apply and iterate and get 1% better. And obviously not somebody who's coming to conversations thinking that he's got it all figured out, she's got it all figured out. Nothing needed here as far as work in progress. If we encounter somebody like that from a leadership perspective, we know that we have somebody that is showing signs of fixed mindset. And the ceiling is already starting to show itself, where this person has reached their cap. They're no longer willing to develop. They're not open-minded. They feel like they have it all figured out, and their skill level and their growth has stagnated. They're no longer pushing themselves to get that 1% better every day. Listening to feedback can often be going through the motions, and it's easy to passively listen. To Morgan's point, acting on feedback is really where the magic happens. Obviously, you have to listen and absorb the feedback in order to act on it, but acting completes the motion, and it really puts everything into the process and starts to get to that 1% better. It's interesting that you brought up your history with dancing and likened it to sales. There are a lot of those sports references that come up all the time at Triple Session that we talk about when we look back to that kind of coaching and the parallels there.
Yeah.
Treat every day like an interview. I want to close with this one because it seems like it's an ongoing conversation that everyone can have. And I never heard anyone really put it this way before. And there should have been quotation marks around this, because that's exactly how you said it to me last week. Treat every day like an interview. And you talked a little bit about professionalism. Tell us a little bit more about how you did this and what your your point of view is on this piece.
Yeah. So I think we're all in kind of a tricky situation where we have this blessing of, for a lot of people, having remote work be an option for us. And I think something that can get lost, especially when you're younger, like maybe this is your first role, or maybe you're new to a remote role, it can be easy to treat it like, hey, I'm just sitting at my desk at home. Like I'm going to be, kind of like slouching and looking into the camera like this, or maybe I'm not, prepared in the way that I might show up if I was going to the office. So I think it's important that you treat every call that you show up on, whether it's with an external facing person or an internal facing person, as if you were going into the office and showing up prepared in that way. And the reason why I think that this is so important is because when I was preparing to interview for the AE role, I was interviewing with our SVP of sales at the time, and I hadn't interacted with him that much. And so I asked my manager, how can I stand out? How can I show him that I'm ready to take on this role, that I'm ready to start having these larger, more strategic conversations with actual customers? And one thing that my manager told me was that, hey, you've been interviewing since day one. Every day you come into the office, every day you show up on a Zoom call, when you show up and you look professional and you're able to speak in a professional way and you're able to hold a conversation, you're able to show that you're present and want to show up in a really professional way, you're interviewing every single day, whether you know it or not. Every call that you're on with leadership, every time you might be in an office with them, they're taking note of you and how you show up every day, because that's what your customer is going to see. And so it's so important to think of that from an executive standpoint. Would that executive want you to show up the way that you're showing up in front of a customer? And be honest with yourself. If there's some tweaks you can make those tweaks.
This is so key. And when we really think about, especially moving internally, which for most BDR, SDR moves to an AE role, we're talking about an internal promotion. Even though, as you had mentioned it, you went through an interview process, the decision is kind of made before that process already gets started.
Yep.
Most people know that already, and it's made over those incremental days here and here and here and here leading up to it. So by the time you get to an interview process, it's a rubber stamp. And if you're doing your job the way you should be, and like you're saying, presenting yourself the way you should be, in effect is a rubber stamp. All you have to, it's yours to lose at that point. Go through the motions, present, talk about your strengths, talk about where you're working on, talk about your plan as an AE, but your body of work, both in numbers and how professional you've been throughout, that's your interview. You've already done it. Trust equals consistency over time. And the biggest advantage that BDRs, SDRs have when they're going for that next role is that you have the trust over time advantage versus somebody coming from the outside. You have the ability to build that narrative and tell the story you want to be told about you over a series of weeks and months, and maybe like you for a year and a half going through both SDR and BDR roles. You can tell that story. So the end is already known by the time you get there. I thought that one was really, really insightful. You also brought up a point that doesn't get a lot of airtime, but I think it's important to know because it's not a sexy topic, but it's true. How you look, how you dress, how you present yourself, these things matter. I mean, you might not want them to matter, but think about going to your doctor's office. If you show up to your doctor and your doctor is in cargo shorts and an I'm with stupid t-shirt, you're going to scratch your head and say, where am I? What's going on? How professional is this?
Yeah.
It's the same in our world as well. And if you could show up in a very clean, crisp, professional way every day, you just build a lot more trust internally with leadership when you're asking for that role versus when you're just taking your foot off the gas, showing that you really don't care that much, presenting in a way that's so laid back that it's going to hurt your impression with your clientele. And if it hurts your impression with leads and your customers, it's hurting your impression with your boss too.
Yep, 100%. And there was even a situation at Speckett, we went through a riff, which I know that's something that a lot of people are going through right now. And there were two individuals that had the same role, and they were pretty much even as far as quota attainment and all of that. And one was let go, who consistently showed up in an unprofessional way. They kept to the person who showed up in a professional way. And it's not about wearing a suit and tie every day, but it's about showing that you care and showing that you actually want to be in seat and doing the role that you're doing.
It's true. We judge people on how they look. It's just human nature. And you're either going to understand those rules and play with them, or you're going to fight against them, but pay a pretty heavy consequence. So there we are. It goes really, really fast. Oh, I swear that says 20.
I've been watching the clock. There we go.
Yeah, that's it. 20-minute sprint.
Amazing.
5 key essentials of everything that you're going to want to know to go from BDR, SDR up to an AE role. This was really, really insightful. Appreciate it, Morgan. Thanks for dropping some knowledge on us here. A lot of what we've already distilled is in triple session right now. We have a brand new cold calling best practices track. Show a lot of your skills there. Measure your coachability. Measure that you're putting the effort in. If you were not taking notes, don't worry about it. I have distilled everything down into this nice PDF one-pager. If you're here, you're going to get it in your inbox shortly enough. Morgan and I are going to hang around for another 10 minutes here for Q&A. If you got them, pop them right here in the chat here, and we will answer them in the order that they come in. Again, thank you so much again, Morgan Buchanan from Speckett, for sharing with us your essentials on going from BDR to AE.
Absolutely. Yeah. Happy to answer any questions. I can drop my LinkedIn link in the chat as well. Would love to connect with all of you and answer any questions that you might have there too.
Also, if we don't get to any of the questions that come up here, we have a nice Slack community for triple session. Go to triplesession.com. You can jump right into our Slack group, join there. There's a little Q&A section right in there. So if we don't get to it, jump right in and ask your questions there. I'll make sure that I get to them, and I make sure Morgan gets some eyeballs on them as well if they're intended for her. Anything that we could jump into, any questions of what we went over here from either the IC perspective of moving into that next role, or my point of view when I look at it from leadership and how I'm looking at making that really key decision on who gets that next call up. One page is here. Morgan, thanks for putting your LinkedIn. We'll give another minute here, see if anyone has any questions. If not, we can get some time back.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. That was great. So as a leader, how would you feel? Like, I know that sales assembly has some great trainings on like AE trainings. Is that something that if an SDR on your team were to complete it and let you know, is that something you'd see as initiative, or is that like too soon? Like not it?
Never too soon to start working on skill building and development. So there are a couple of things there. And I'll go back to Morgan's first point of stating intent really early and having that conversation early, because that's effectively like qualifying the buyer, right? Because when you're going for that next job, your buyer is the hiring manager that you're looking to sell to get you into that next job. I would work out the details of what's the path, what do you want to see from me, and where can we go next? Typically starting to skill build for those AE type skills, that comes closer towards that promotion when you've really figured out and you've got the system working and the formula cracked for your current role. So what I wouldn't want to see is somebody who's already training for the AE role when they really haven't even gotten their stride in the BDR role. Okay. What I'd love to see is somebody really working their ass off, trying to get that mastery of the BDR role first. And then when there's consistent performance month over month, now starting to join discovery calls with the reps, starting to take discovery, sales assembly stuff. Triple Session has tons of stuff as well. And the reason why we built our platform is everything that we do is documented in a unique profile. So you show exactly all of the training that you've done for all of the micro skills, whether it's discovery or building urgency or presenting or demo skills or negotiating skills. You could show up to that conversation and say, hey, I have trained 67 out of the last 89 days. And you could look at all these different micro skills along the way. So I'd work with your manager on what that progression is. And then the documentation is key. So yeah, take the initiative, document it, put it down, and then show up with it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. That's a softball question here at Triple Session. That's why we built it. Keep them coming.
I'd like to add something to that too. I think, you know, when you're looking to stand out from maybe a pack of BDRs to get after that one AE promotion, I think it's really, really important to show that you have the courage to take the initiative like that. That like, hey, you know, maybe I'm not ready right now, but this is where I want to go. And this is what I want to start doing. Because whether you like it or not, like sometimes I think that I'm a really bad salesperson because I'm so not pushy. I'm not a pushy person, but it's like you do have to show that you're going to take initiative and put yourself out there as the best option for that person. So I think that that translates directly into a lot of the selling that you will do as an AE in the future.
You could jump the line on that stuff a lot as well, because, you know, hiring managers are people too, and they're going to look at the conversations they need to have internally. And it's just a lot harder to say no to somebody who's asked for it a long time ago and really worked hard to get there and proven that she's wanted it from day one. She's put the effort in, she's performed. This other person, maybe they've wanted it, maybe they put the effort in, maybe they performed, but because they didn't call me to task and say, I want this, I want to be next. Now, oh, I'm going to go to the person that has told me that she wants it versus the one that hasn't put me on the spot yet. I love being put on the spot as a hiring manager, you know, and then I flip it right back around and say, all right, you're going to put me on the spot. Do this, do this, do this. And then the great people say, okay, so if I do this and do this and do this, next job is mine. Like, okay, we'll see in the interview. That's a great way to get that conversation started. Great. Well, looks like the chat is empty. If anyone else thinks of anything else, jump into the Triple Session Slack group, put the questions in our Q&A channel that we have in there. Once again, the lovely and talented Morgan Buchanan, thank you for this critical time. It really, really helpful. I think everybody got a lot out of it. I know I did. And everyone here, the one-page PDF will be in your inbox. And next week, if you're interested in getting some of those discovery skills, I'm going to be on the Triple Session 20-minute sprint with Brandon Kirsch, who is a 4-time President's Club winner from HubSpot. He is going to walk us through all the stuff that he does to go really deep into discovery, deep dive discovery skills from Brandon. You're not going to want to miss this one. He's one of the best salespeople I have ever had the opportunity to meet and get to know. So thanks so much again, Morgan. Thanks everyone for showing up. Congrats on putting another 20-minute session on the books, working on your personal skills. Remember always, practice makes progress. Daily training is the way to go. See you next time.
Thanks. Bye.